Hey there, welcome to the Astro Psyche. This video is about Saturn in Pisces. So I wanted to share with you a bit about what Saturn in Pisces will be like, what to expect. We are fully in the Saturn in Pisces period, which began March of this year, March of 2023, and will go through February of 2026. So I wanted to share a little bit about collectively what we can all experience or expect to experience with Saturn and Pisces. And then I also wanted to talk about folks who are experiencing their Saturn return in Pisces, and as well as how this may impact folks who have personal planets and placements, not just in Pisces, but in other signs as well that Saturn will be aspecting. If you don't know me yet, if we haven't met, my name is Shauna McGrath. I'm a psychotherapist and astrologer. And yeah, I would love to share with you a little bit about my thoughts on Saturn and Pisces. So, Saturn is about boundaries, structure, diligence, responsibility, limitations. It's also about devotion. So, I think that oftentimes we can have a more negative view of Saturn, and this is, not without validity because Saturn tends to symbolize challenging experiences. And this is because we typically don't like to be hemmed in or have limitations, responsibilities, etc. So Saturn is very much about being confronted with our own mortality, with our time limitations, with a sense of duty and even sacrifice. Those are also Saturn themes. And Saturn is also the things that we devote ourselves to, the things that we willingly and lovingly dedicate and devote our time and energy to. Now, Pisces, so what is Pisces? So that's a little bit about Saturn. And we'll go more as we move through. Pisces as a sign is about fluidity, feeling, emotional intelligence, awareness, intuition. Pisces, interestingly, is about a diffusion of the boundaries, where boundaries are more diffuse or sometimes non-existent, or sometimes difficult to feel into, sometimes difficult to manage, or difficult to even create. And Pisces, we always want to keep in mind that Pisces is a mutable sign. Mutable signs are also called the double-bodied signs, and so they're about transitional states. They're about paradox, being this and then being that at the same time. Pisces is also a water sign. Water signs are about fluidity and movement and freedom of expression. There's emphasis around emotions and relationships. And water signs are also about fitting ourselves into a scenario. So rather than imposing our needs and wishes and desires onto something, water signs are more about modifying ourselves so that we fit into a scenario, for better or worse, right? So Pisces as a sign is really about being malleable, and Pisces, folks who have a strong Pisces emphasis, they tend to be very motivated towards humanitarian issues. They tend to be very compassionate, very giving. And what I think is really interesting about Saturn and Pisces is that these two energies sort of seem to have different agendas. Saturn is about structure, structure and relationships and boundaries, whereas Pisces is more about taking things as they come and feeling it out. And so there is this interesting combination here. Now, what this may feel like for all of us is that we are learning to negotiate Saturn, the structures of our lives, as it relates to things like intuition and giving and receiving and compassion. And Pisces is also about things like volunteering and donating and giving away your time and money and how much you do that. And so I think that there's a negotiation here that's happening over these next couple of years in how it is that we relate to structure and boundaries, and how maybe how generous we are with our money, with our time, with our resources, and how we maybe want to create stronger energetic boundaries. I think that's the key thing here, is that whereas Saturn in Aquarius was more about creating boundaries around things like innovation and our thoughts, which is very Aquarian. Aquarius is very much about the collective as well. Whereas this transit, Saturn in Pisces, it's more about finding how we can have emotional boundaries within ourselves versus an action of boundaries. And so what I mean by that is I'm thinking of scenarios where maybe we let's see here. How do I want to articulate this? Scenarios maybe where we set a boundary or say no, but then we continue to think about it. We continue to do the psychic work around it, or we feel guilty about saying no. That's an internal boundary system. So there can be times, and I think this is especially so for those of us who are very caring in a helping and healing field, whether you're a teacher or a nurse or a counselor or a coach or a therapist, etc. We are in that work because we are very invested in helping folks manage difficult situations in whatever way that may be. And so a part of that is that our psyche is wrapped up in the psyche of other people. And so we can say, okay, I'm not going to do this task, or I'm going to leave work at this time, earlier rather than later, etc. But then there can still be that internal process around, again, feeling guilty about it, or thinking about the work scenario, or thinking about the drawing of the boundary itself. And so I think that Saturn in Pisces over the next couple of years is reminding us that it's not enough to take an action in the material world, that we also want to work with and manage and cultivate our own inner sense of structure and our inner sense of honoring limitations, and that though it feels like our thoughts are always running, I mean, I don't know about you, but it feels like if we're awake, we're thinking. When we're meditating, we're still thinking. And then, of course, we have a thought and we come back at some point. And the thoughts that we have, the emotions that we have, the inner experiences that we have, that all draws on our inner energy resources. So there is no part of you that's not being used or exercised if you're thinking about someone else. So if you're experiencing worry or frustration or anxiety, or thinking about a scenario, your energy is being directed into that scenario. And this is not to say that this is a bad thing. Like, this is what we do, again, especially folks who are empathic, empaths, highly sensitives, or folks who are in the helping and healing fields. We are channeling our energy into helping others. And so I think it's a natural response, and it's something that we're trained to do very often in our family system and our culture. And what we want to do is just bring more awareness to the concept that our thoughts and our emotions are using our energy as well. And I think that's a big part of Saturn in Pisces. Now, folks who have their natal Saturn in Pisces, so if you were born when Saturn was in Pisces, this means that you are experiencing your Saturn return. What is Saturn return? anytime that we have a planet that returns to the place where it was when you were born, this is called insert planet name here, return. So you can have your Venus return, your Mercury return, your Mars return, your Jupiter return, and so on. This is where this marks a point. It's a part of a broader cycle where there is a return to you, and it's a return to you and your energy and your most authentic nature. And when this happens, so when this can happen with the other planets, and it happens in shorter cycles than Saturn. So, for example, your solar return is your birthday, right? So that happens once a year. And Jupiter return happens every 12 years. Saturn return happens about every 28-ish years. So for most of us, hopefully we'll have about 3 Saturn returns in our lifetime. It happens when you're about in your late 20s, again in your late 50s, and then again around your mid to late 80s. And so, but what does this mean, right? So Saturn return is a period of several years where we are returning to our authentic way of being, in a way that is very connected to our material existence, because Saturn is the material, it's our physicality. And so Saturn is about the structure of our lives. Saturn is about the structure of our lives. It's about our committed relationships. It's about our home and our family life, and how we have organized the scaffolding of our life. And if things are not in alignment, or if there is a construing or a dysfunctionalness there, and when I say dysfunctional, I mean that we're doing something that is not life-giving, something that is draining or toxic, or we're giving in a way that is either not in alignment, or is giving too much, or not receiving enough, those kinds of things. Those types of issues can come up around Saturn return. And Saturn return invokes a response from us. Saturn return is typically a time where we are confronted with our dysfunctions. It's typically a time where we're confronted with scenarios that are not working for us. And this is not a light switch on-off scenario, because typically there's something that has been happening that we've been doing for years and years, that has been somewhat dysfunctional or not life-giving or not really working. But for whatever reason, again, as it's not a judgment call. These behaviors we've been doing because we were conditioned to do them through our culture, our family of origin. We have been doing them as a protective measure because we had to during a certain period of time. And so all of these behaviors, whether it is overgiving or overworking, or not prioritizing and acknowledging our own authentic needs and feelings and desires, being in a relationship where we are modifying ourselves, or denying a part of ourselves in order to be in that relationship. Again, this is usually all unconscious things. Those behaviors can sort of like run for a long period of time. And then when we have Saturn return, it becomes very apparent that there is a dysfunction, and it becomes more difficult to continue along this path. Not impossible, but it becomes more difficult. And so I think it's kind of like, it's interesting that we think Saturn return is bad and challenging, and it is challenging because confronting our own neuroses, confronting our own patterns of behavior that are dysfunctional, that is like, it hurts, and it's not fun, and it's not fun to change the way that you've been doing things. Now, sometimes I think we can be doing everything in a right way and in alignment, and we can still have a challenging experience. I think that's the nature of Saturn, is that Saturn is about our mortality as well. And so there's always this part of confronting the reality that we have this one lifetime that we are living, and we have a limited period of time here. So I think like this is tough stuff. And when we experience the Saturn return, it is strengthening. It brings us, as we move through it, it brings us a sense of surety, of confidence, of trust in ourselves, trust in the world. And a lot of this depends on our circumstances, our resources, our the cultural resources that we have available to us via things like our social economic status, our family of origin, etc. And so before I move on, I want to say, if you were born during 1993 through 1996, you have Saturn in Pisces. If you were born in 1964 through 1967, you have Saturn in Pisces. And then again, if you were born in 1935 through 38, I'll put more detailed dates below, because sometimes there's a retrograde that happens. But if you were born during those years, you most likely have Saturn in Pisces and will be experiencing this phase of Saturn return from March of 2023 to February of 2026. Now, I also want to say, this is also really important, is that for folks who have planets or points in the mutable signs, so the signs that are Pisces, as well as Virgo, as well as Sagittarius and Gemini, if you have planets or points in any of those signs, this Saturn and Pisces transit is also connecting into your birth chart and will bring Saturn themes into your life. Again, in a way that is unique to you based on your current life experience, how old you are, where you are in your phase of life, and then also how your birth chart is configured to transiting Saturn and Pisces, as well as to how that's configuring, the whole web of your birth chart. So I think this is important to know too. And Saturn is always a call to action or a call to awareness around the structure of our lives and how we're operating in the use of our energy and our time and our resources, how we are drawing boundaries, what our relationship is to limitation. And what Saturn is saying via your life circumstances and your feelings is, it's like asking us how we manage things like overwork. Do we feel confidence or lack of confidence? What is our relationship to self-esteem and self-worth? Those are very connected into Saturn. How are we using our resources, our energy, saying no and meaning no, especially, again, working with Saturn and Pisces? How are we embracing and working with limitation? And how are we, especially depression and low mood and feeling powerless? That's a big theme around Saturn as well. So how are we sort of like feeling and transforming? And there's a word here that I really want to use, but it's kind of like, how are we letting off steam around and sort of like letting off the pressure around situations where there is depression or low mood or sort of feelings of hopelessness? That can be a strong theme around Saturn as well. And I think that there's three broader themes that we can do to really work with Saturn energy. I think the biggest thing is experiencing the experience, like really finding a way to allow the experience to be what it is without trying to bypass it or override it. And we can do this through awareness, through a mindfulness practice. I'm very relational. I think that we heal through relationships. And so we can do this by talking with folks about difficult experiences that we're having. Again, talking with folks who are safe, whether that is a close friend or family member, someone that you feel safe with, that lets you have your experience without judging it or being critical of it. Can also be a counselor, someone in your community that you feel comfortable with, or of course a therapist. When we experience something and sort of where we can feel it as well as talk through it and experience it through either reframing it or digesting. I think that's kind of the word I was looking for, is digesting it. We can sort of digest it and transmute it, and then it can flow. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that the challenging experience always goes away, but it allows for us to not be stuck in that heaviness that Saturn can symbolize. And that's really what depression is it's about sort of a hard experience, sort of being like almost like frozen or locked in for some reason. Again, that's usually unconscious. It's not, we don't do it on purpose, and it's usually a protective measure. But the more that we can sort of like make that more malleable, warm it up by feeling it and talking through it, processing it, that can help. The other thing is that we benefit from looking at where we have a choice with Saturn. Saturn can often feel like it can show experiences where we feel like we're boxed in, we have no options, and then that can very easily go into a spiral of helplessness or defeat. And so we always want to look at where we have choice, where we have power, where we have control, even if that choice is not a great one, even if it's not the choice that we want to orient ourselves toward our own power and autonomy and choice in a situation. And then, of course, whenever you're experiencing a Saturn transit, this is a fantastic time for psychotherapy. This is a fantastic time for looking at the ways in which your life, and I think this is especially for folks who feel like it has come to their attention that what they've always done isn't working anymore. And I think that with Saturn, because the energy is heavy, it can, and if we don't have any other transits that are involving things that are more spacious, like Jupiter or Uranus, it can kind of be difficult to find a way forward. And so I think that Saturn can, or psychotherapy can help us sort of like, again, warm up that challenging situation, make it more malleable, and find a way to move forward. And again, for folks who have their sun, moon, rising, Venus, Mercury, Mars in mutable signs, so if you have any of those planets or personal points in Pisces or in Virgo, in Sagittarius or in Gemini, this Saturn in Pisces transit from March of 2023 to February of 2026 is going to be connecting into your chart at some point during this time period. Now, I also want to say too, if you have Saturn, your natal Saturn, in any of these mutable signs, this is also activating a Saturn transit as well. Because when we have Saturn making a square or an opposition to our natal Saturn, this is also it's kind of like, you can think of it as like a more subtle or smaller scale Saturn return, where themes that came up around your original Saturn return, that those are also being activated this time again. So it's sort of like more subtle, but it is like, yes, it is Saturn time for those of you as well that have your natal Saturn in Pisces, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Jupiter. I want to acknowledge a comment here. LL says, watched one of your videos years ago about meditation. and that you've enjoyed my videos. Awesome. Thank you so much. So nice to have you here. Thank you so much for being here with me. I always love to hear from you. I would love to hear if this resonates with you, what your experience has been, and if there's anything else that you want from this period, or just thoughts that you have that come up as I share this with you. I am wishing you a most easeful and joyful, and I want to say efficient too, efficient Saturn and Pisces period. I don't know why that word is coming through. But yeah, I'm wishing you a very easeful experience through this, and sending you lots of love, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.